How will we build the future healthcare system for all European citizens? Well, to answer this and to take us much further, we now have our opening 50-minute roundtable. This will be moderated by our former French Minister of State and Industry, Christian Pierret, who is joined by his eminent panel, who he will now introduce.
Dear friends and colleagues, as introduction of our first roundtable, I'd like to say that we are, for the whole world today, shaping the health ecosystem for tomorrow, especially for citizens and patients, a patient-oriented health system. And we hold this meeting and event at a very special, could we say, at a truly historical time with the story of the anti-COVID vaccine. Never in medicine history such a decisive outcome has been achieved so swiftly, and so important and significant in this actual revolution. The word is from Emmanuel Macron, who recalled his intervention a few months ago, an actual revolution in healthcare and life sciences. Genetic therapy, healing of rare disease, immuno-oncology, genomics, DNA sequencing, RNA as healthcare carrier, artificial intelligence. We stay at a turning point, the encounter of complexity and societal, the encounter of an extraordinary scientific complexity solved by remarkable achievements and societal phenomena and in a global context of a pandemic. A consequence of that of utmost importance could be drawn. R&D has been transformed, deeply transformed. The relationships between actors of health are different after the COVID-19. In particular, the patient plays a new role in the chain of health. These are the reasons why we propose today, all we the four, for this first roundtable, to integrate our reflections in a broader perspective with regard to health innovation, to discern the meaning, the very meaning of what we are doing at a very stage of the value chain of innovation for health. What is at stake is our ability to set up a strong coherence between our core business values in life sciences with what the whole global society wants to satisfy the need of good health in an open and democratic society, and to guarantee a large access for patients to the best medicines at an acceptable price. It's a problem, at an acceptable price for them and for the financing of investment, while benefiting for the patients of the last upgraded breakthrough in medical knowledge and associated technologies. I just mentioned ongoing turmoil in the today's ecosystem of health. Unfortunately, it's clear that, first of all, COVID crisis disorganized rules of game. Among companies, big pharma and SMEs as well, rules of game between companies and public organizations, WHO, states, group of states, EU, etc. Intellectual property rights are threatened by demands of poor nations and humanitarian organizations for urgent patient care. Here, rules are upset for the future. And we all know about no R&D upstream if no protection and compensation for entrepreneurs. Is there a right for the patient to be cared without correct remuneration of research or production, or vaccine and medicine on behalf of human rights? It's a heavy question indeed, which is raised with the diffusion of the vaccine, at what price, for who, for what people, etc. Second problem, raising inflation today, a huge rise of inflation, spread all over the world, turns upside down financing conditions and financial markets. High interest rates could indirectly hinder an access to medicines and state-of-the-art technologies, therapies for modest and disadvantaged people. High interest rates could break or even stop certain fundamental researchers financed by debt in case of equity lack. Third question, the ever more fierce competition between big states, mainly US, China, Japan, EU, becomes a kind of war. The word doesn't only point out a classical conflict, but characterize deep and dangerous antagonism of industrial countries in their aim to take the lead in the globalized world. Please have in mind what Mr. Xi Jinping said recently at the National Assembly of China about healthcare. It is one of the five issues he designed as a means to create a strong influence, power, and domination, aside attempts like famous Silk Road to create this power, the new power of China. Care and patience are forgotten, and health becomes the shape of the masks of the soft power for certain nations. Only a way to resist for EU. Europe should reset the investment as a priority, not only in health, but all over the economy. Reset the investment, it's our task. Health investment, the Union reaches now and stays quite weak in comparison with US and China. EU should scale up its own investment, private and public. Given the fact that R&D costs show exponential growth, financing, public and private, is for the time being insufficient compared to the efforts made by US and China. Tomorrow will probably appear other viruses or bacteria that will endanger nations in a world that communication easily and where epidemics pass from the continent to another. Not to mention bacteriological warfare capabilities, although international treaties prohibit it. I remember, the question is raised in Russia, for instance. I remember that a few years ago, we spoke seriously in the French government of an anthrax threat. We should be ready for many things that we would not have imagined before COVID crisis. Fourth questions, and last one. I said it at the beginning of my remarks, the threat against health have changed, and research in this field has become not only a matter of researchers, but also a question of society and societal values. New diseases have appeared in new social milieu settings, Ebola in Africa, for instance, that require an overall treatment of a human body in a different health system, immersed themselves in a very different society, a different society from the Western one, distant from those of industrialized countries. Prevention, education, medical treatment, relationship to care have not the same meaning in those countries than in ours. We should adapt ourselves to their objective constraints that determine the achievements of research. To those new diseases correspond new approaches of medicines, treatment, and methods of research. The antibiotic resistance, rare diseases, orphan diseases, etc., all those, this makes it necessary to be creative and to invent new methods of treatment by paths, which until now were not borrowed. COVID showed that way. Obviously, with this new vaccine, oncology is another example we talked about a few seconds ago. All this move of renovation, quite a revolution in health approaches, will place the patient at a key position. A patient which should be considered not only as a field of scientific trial, but also, and perhaps above all, a total human person who can participate actively and personally in the effectiveness of his health care. Now, I would like to give the floor to the panel, and Michael, you have some remarks. I think you come here. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Mr. the Chairman, for this really nice introduction. I think that you set the scene perfectly. And I guess that my role today is to discuss briefly how indeed we can organize innovation in a way to efficiently translate science to healthcare. The point I would like to emphasize here is that indeed patients should be at the center. But if you think about vaccines, we are not talking only about patients, we are talking about citizens. So I think that it's very important to have this in mind. What we are doing here is for the common good, for the interest of society at large. So if you consider which are the major threats today, I guess that you will agree that pandemics, that's obvious, is at the forefront. And their innovation delivered in a spectacular way. However, if you think that to be safe, we have the whole world to be efficiently vaccinated, we are still far away despite the different programs, COVAX and others. In poor countries, only 50% of the population is indeed immunized. So there is still a lot to be done, which shows that science and innovation is not enough. We must be sure that the final steps of translations are well organized as well. You already alluded to antimicrobial resistance. I think this should be a top priority. We know that antimicrobial resistance will be responsible for a huge number of deaths across the European Union, with a huge cost for the economy at large. And there, again, we have some innovative products, new antibiotics, but also new biologics. But the problem there is to provide the industry, the biotechs, with the right incentives. Antimicrobial resistance is an example of so-called market failure. We have indeed to provide, as I said, the incentive to indeed make sure that the critical steps to bring the solutions to the patients, to the citizens, are indeed implemented. You all know that aging and dementia are a major concern also in our societies. And there, the problem is still the scientific complexity. You heard that there is still some hope with some monoclonal antibodies for Alzheimer's, but there are a number of questions about the indication and even the real efficiency of those products. So there, certainly that we need more basic science. Finally, you also alluded to rare diseases. And I think this is extremely important to realize that with the progress of gene therapy and other biological genetic approach, we have more and more efficient solutions. But the problem there is to make those solutions affordable for the patient, for the government, for the society at large. So again, this is an example showing that we cannot isolate innovation. We have indeed to put innovation into context and make sure that if at the end we have an efficient health product, it will be accessible. So I already alluded to some of the critical steps in this long journey from basic science discovery to market access and to delivery to patients. So I would like to make a few remarks there. Basic science is critical. It's very important, and it's improving that basic scientists realize that they have a duty toward the society. So they must be free to organize their research and to put their priority. But if they discover, sometimes it will be by, they have the duty to transfer to healthcare productions. And the property protection, indeed critical, very early stage of basic science. And the technology transfer, obviously we will talk about the important role of biotechs, and biotechs need to transfer the technology, usually from academic institutions. The point I would like to make here is that since the very beginning, the condition of the tech transfer should be sought with in mind the final goal, which is indeed to reach the patients. So we and others, and we made a call with Alain Fischer about this, saying that since the very beginning, there should be clauses in this agreement which will ensure that at the end, products will indeed be affordable. Research and development, I mean, those 2 days are really about research and development, mainly in biotechs, and I will not talk too much about this. I mean, you are better experts than myself on this then, but I would like to insist on the role of regulators. And there again, since the very beginning of the research, you must have in mind what the regulator will ask in order to have the final product accepted and again, finally reaching the patients. And I would say that regulators have, especially in Europe, have made spectacular progress. When you see how they handle the COVID-19 vaccine, I think it's just remarkable, because we should insist on the fact that all the different which the maximal products, indeed, they were all considered in a short period of time, but every step was in as it should done with previous vaccine. Then payers' approval. That's a critical step, of course, because even if a product is approved by EMA, and we have now example with some COVID-19 therapeutics, it doesn't mean that at the end the product will be accessible, will be reimbursed. And for this, I think it's extremely important to facilitate the conversation between regulators and payers. And obviously there we need the so-called health technology assessment to make sure that the new products, which are efficient and safe, are also providing benefit to patients, citizens, and society. Then obviously, and that's especially the case for vaccine, we must be sure that even if the products are there, they are affordable, they are delivered to patients. And there, obviously, there is a lot to be said about the way communication is organized. And my point of view is that we cannot leave this communication to industry companies, public organizations, important role to explain the benefit, the risk of what's proposed to patients. And a very important point also in relation to vaccines is to make sure that post-marketing surveillance is organized the way it should in order to make sure that benefits are there and that new rare risks do not appear. All these, and this is my main message today, we need organized public-private partnership. We have to align the interest of industry and governments. And based on my experience as Executive Director of the European Innovative Medicines Initiative, I would like to make here a few points. First, you need clear objective. What is this partnership about? Is it to develop a new diagnostic? Is it to develop new tools to monitor the efficiency of the safety of a medical product? Is it to develop a new med product or a new medtech device? And there, what is building trust between the worlds. I have no time to explain that the worlds of science and is not easy. I spent 5 years of my life doing so. Easy because each sector has its own, but also is, and it's very important they learn to know. Then the point I would like to make, you need a balanced governance. When you have big pharma involved in this public-private partnership, it's very important to make sure that they completely the partnership. And that's why you need like a honest broker between the different partners, which indeed make sure that the way the project is progressing is in the interest of each stakeholder, of each partner. Finally, and I think that we have to say this in Europe, what we are lacking in Europe is someone like Bill Gates or other venture philanthropists. And it's my experience that when you bring those venture philanthropists on board of this public-private partnership, you ensure indeed some form of balance between all interests, and also you make sure that the interest of society, again, patients, are well taken on board. So with this slide mentioning that I think that in Europe we have a number of strengths, an excellent basic science, a culture of all are making progress in scientific literature, good vision, but we have insufficient investments. Our efforts are fragmented in Europe. You know what's done at the union level and in the. And finally, and this conclusion, we have to change the risk. In Europe, risk aversion is a real problem, and this makes a huge difference as we compare our situation with the situation in the US. I think we have to learn that risk is inherent to promote innovation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Michael, for those very stimulating remarks. Now the floor is to you, Felicitas. I mentioned in my introduction the importance of European institutions, and especially the European Investment Bank that you're today representing in favor and at service of the patients.
Yeah. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. I think lots of you are probably surprised why a bank is talking to you and how can we support for all of us to achieve the ambitious aims ahead. It's my clear intention that after the 7 minutes that I will talk to you, that you will understand how we can support in these activities. I would like to first introduce the areas of where we as EIB are active in, and then I would like to share with you the lessons learned from the COVID pandemic from our point of view, as to my mind this is an essential step to be better prepared and to do better going forward. But then last but not least, also explain to you with some specific examples on how this is done and how we can potentially also work together and forward. So the bank itself, we typically invest in the life science and health sector about 2 billion a year. During the COVID crisis, we actually stepped up our initiatives and indeed in 2020 and 2021 deployed up to 5 to 6 billion in the sector. The sector is quite broad, and I would like to explain a little bit more in detail what this entails. First of all, EIB is active in supporting the healthcare infrastructure that goes from primary healthcare up to tertiary university hospitals, but includes as well innovative ways of providing services such as e-health or telemedicine. Secondly, we are very active in the area of clinical development, and that includes the support of new biologics and new small molecules, but equally so innovative therapies such as gene or cell therapy, but also vaccination and other initiatives. We are also active in the area of diagnostics, and this also was very crucial in the way of the COVID pandemic, as this is a very important first step in order to be able to treat patients correctly. And last but not least, medical devices are also an important role. During the COVID pandemic, it was evident that Europe, or I think the world globally, was faced with several issues. It was not only the fact that I assume the world globally underestimated the impact of globalization, and that something that started locally could really impact all of us. But what we were faced with was a deteriorated, not fit for purpose healthcare infrastructure that also lacked the flexibility and the capacity to cater for such an influx of patients in a very short time. It was also evident that we have a shortage of healthcare workforce, not only in Europe, but across the world. Low middle income countries were particularly impacted by this shortage, even though in terms of number of deaths, it seemed to be less severe than in some European countries. What was also evident and should give us food for thought is the fact that the disruption of supply chains had some severe impact also for citizens in Europe. We have to remember that in particular when we consider API, that up to 90% of certain APIs are coming or are being produced currently in India and China. And therefore, if something does not work, it was not just that we didn't have the right means to treat COVID patients, but actually we had a shortage of many standard care products, be it chemotherapeutica, be it anesthesia, or be it painkillers. And this is something we also need to take into consideration. Manufacturing capacities and the fact to be invest in pandemic preparedness has also been something that we need to look into when going forward. To end this on a positive note, I think COVID has also demonstrated that public health interventions can make a meaningful contribution to solve a crisis, but also something I'm very proud of. It has been science, and in particular European science, that contributed massively to provide a solution to the crisis. And that should all give us hope that, in particular for the biotech sector, there's now an increased awareness of the importance and relevance of the sector, and we should really build on it in order to be better prepared for the future. How we or what we offer from EIB's side is we are a bank, so we provide loans. I need to also be clear, so we are not a grant provider. But if you look in the evolution of companies, it's of course important that at the beginning you support a company with the right financial instruments. This is mostly a grant money, then followed by equity investments. But then an important part that is particularly also missing in Europe is the venture debt part. And EIB, through its subsidiary, the EIF, we cover the equity part, so be it support of business angels, tech transfer organizations, but also major venture capital funds and seed funds across Europe. We also from EIB directly support startup companies and SMEs in their growth phase. And normally what we do is we support them with a product that is called venture debt. And this is something where, again, we provide a non-dilutive financial instrument to support the growth phase of companies in order to allow them to exploit their potential in Europe. This is something that is also extremely important for us, that we try to not only to exploit, let's put it that way. We want to maintain some leading edge of European science and ensure that it can be fully exploited within Europe. let me conclude with providing you with some examples. We are very proud that we have been supporting BioNTech. We already supported their technology before COVID, so for their mRNA cancer technology. And therefore, when the COVID crisis came upon, we easily re-engaged with them in March 2020 to see whether or not this would also be a potential solution for COVID, and we all know the results of it. Another example, which here you might be familiar, is that we have support Karma, that's in an artificial heart, and this is also something to give you an illustration how risky type of investments we also do support with our financing. We have supported a German biotech company called Genethon, which had an interesting product, human milk oligosaccharides. So it is basically, to simplify, the natural antibiotics that are found in mother milk. And this was also a product that received the fastest ever novel food registration by the FDA. But also we supported diagnostic companies such as Scope Fluids and Mobidiac, which also offered some solutions in COVID. So in conclusion, unfortunately, there's not one fits all solution, but I think I want to strengthen what my previous speakers have said. We all need to join forces. We need to build upon the complementarity of each of us, and together we can address the challenges that are in front of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Felicitas, for this stimulating expose. Now, I spoke, Danielle, about new methods in medicine, and Felicitas spoke about joining our forces. So what is at stake with you in this perspective?
Yes, thank you. So thank you, Christian, to invite me here to share my impressionist view of the situation now in innovation in Europe. So I should share some anecdotes with you. We have a very short time, hoping that it will inspire you or will give you ideas. To be honest, I'm sometimes very pessimistic with Europe, but there are good reasons also to be optimistic. And I will share that with you too. So to summarize, I was requested by Christian to make a sort of history of my career. It's a big honor to do this, but I will take this as an advantage to share some stories with you that could inspire you or inspire anyone to help us to be very innovative. So the summary is a patient-centric scientific obstinacy. This is the way I would summarize this with this other sentence, which is complexity is not complicated. That's the main problem we have in biology, but also in politics and in geopolitics. So we should be optimistic here if you have the right angle to tackle that. So the next slide is the story here is about 4 periods of about 5-10 years. Genethon first and Genopol. I founded with other colleagues. Millennium Pharmaceutical in the US. I co-founded. Genset, I was not a founder, but it has been very helpful for me to understand the R&D and the system. Pharnext is the last company I was a founder. And Tangramed is the next company I am founding now. And I want to go through this to share with you some experience I had through this path. Okay? So these are the 3 first. Well, you have Ceph, Genethon, Genopol, the first period, then Millennium, then Genset. About Genethon, it's a fantastic story, but they had a sort of obstination that was, we should be in science 40 years ago. I thought we should be less hypothesis-driven. Okay, I had the feeling that scientists focus on their own protein, on their own gene, centering the universe around this, not having a sort of plain view of the complexity of biology, and we realized at that time that genetics could be a way to make an inventory of all possibilities, to make it more R&D. We could identify all drug targets at once for a disease without understanding the disease. Okay? So that was the main shape of the ideas we had at that time. So we created a big factory of large-scale automation to produce that. That was the first contribution to the UN genome effort at that time. But how this happened? Okay. I was very lucky to have a boss, Jean Dossé, Nobel Prize, that received a legacy of 10 million euros at that time. And he told me, take it to do your dream. Okay, I was very lucky. Yeah? Then I met fantastic patients, mainly the Muscular Dystrophy Association, and they decided against the trend at that time also to invest in hypothesis-free research, and we created a Genethon like this. That has been a fantastic venture. And politicians helped us too. François Mitterrand was big help because he understood the potential of this sort of approach, and he put a lot of money. So therefore, I've been lucky to have a fantastic team, but also support from people taking risk against the opinion of at the epoch. Okay? So when this was achieved, we generated the first automation, big data in humans, and bioinformatics that was the precursor of our AI as it is done now. Okay? Then we became famous. I was attracted in the US by a guy named Mark Levin, a venture guy in the US. They said, come. So he told me, we take 2-3 guys like you, Eric Lander, that was another genomicist at that time, and Jeff Friedman, who discovered the leptin, and basically say, sit down here, and we will put 20 million, just for you to think. No IP, no product candidate, just think. We formed then Millennium, and Millennium was sold $9 billion 15 years later. Just by this, okay, because they took the risk to put money on nothing, okay, just on people. And then I prefer to stay in Europe at the end, and I joined an already formed company named Genset, where I learned a lot about R&D, but also developing new technology that could help us to make the inventory of our targets. So I learned listing, NASDAQ, that was very important to me. At the end, the company was acquired by Serono, sort of big pharma that was itself acquired by Merck. But I learned a lot at that time. But something I realized that despite having genetics, large-scale genetics, and a lot of bioinformatics, big data, the system did not improve at all. So we have many targets, but still the same 10% success rate or 90% failure rate. So I say there is something wrong here. So therefore, I went to a new company. I formed a new company called FarNext, where I say, in my mind, the issue is that diseases are so complex that we could not go on to monotherapy, single drug targets, because the biology is too complex. So I decided to work on combination of drugs, and with one obsession, that was really patient-centric. Not only we want to improve the rate of success, but also improve the quality of our drugs. Because the drugs with monotherapy are marginally efficacious. And here, basically, you have an illustration in this company. On the bottom of the slide, you see the work we have done on Alzheimer's, a clinical trial. In purple, you have the placebo. You see they decline. In black, you have a drug that is aducanumab made by Biogen, the same issue now with the new drug they announced. You just slow down the decline, but you not improve the patients, okay? And you see that our high-dose drug in red combination of two generics improve the patients, not only slow down the decline. The same for the other disease, Charcot-Marie-Tooth, you see your placebo decline, and the high dose of the treatment, which was a combination of 3 drugs, improve the patient and not only slow down the decline. So the issue here, I had 2 challenges, is that we decided to combine with AI generics, repurpose generics and combine them. And this was a bad idea, actually, because the industry was not interested in this, saying, how can we price, even if you have a strong patent, how can we price a mixture of 3 generics? Okay? If the generics is $1 each per day, the mixture will be $3. It was not true because the payer agreed to pay, but the industry had the feeling that if they overprice generics, they will be criticized, and they refused completely this approach. So the company was dead of this, mostly. And more than that, we had also accidental CMC issue that was not good for the company, so the company didn't want well. And 3 years ago, I decided to switch to something else, not to change the approach, still with the same idea, combining with AI. And I formed now a new company called Tangramed, where I just adapt my obstinacy to continue, which is still using a lot of AI because we have much more data than we had before, but also not only using generics or existing drugs, mixing with new chemical entity to have less pricing issues. And the third thing I did is to have an international company dealing with science in Europe, China, and North America. That's a big change compared to what we did before. So, in conclusion, so I have a few thoughts I would like to share with you. The one is a little bit provocative here, I would say. We need to disconnect private and public funding. Today, the problem is that public funding, we cannot criticize private funding. Okay? VCs in Europe especially have a lot of problems to find cash, so they have to limit their risk. It's not risk aversion, it's just technical. Okay, so therefore, we know that there is a need, as Felicitas said, to have late-stage financing, which is very important, because if not, we die of this. But late-stage financing, like I told you today, with Millennium and Genethon, is crucial, okay? Because the unicorns don't come from late-stage product. The unicorns come from the DNA of the vision. And only early-stage financing will help us to create unicorns. That I'm convinced of this 100%. So we need a lot of imagination, not to match with VC, because VC cannot think this way. It's not a critique, they just can't. So we need to have impulse with public funding or philanthropy funding to allow early stage funding of ideas. There are many people that are a lot of imagination in Europe. This is for sure. Stanford, if you know, or California, the first 2 nationalities there are French and Chinese. So we know how to make it. But the problem, we don't have the technical support and financial support to do this. Okay. So we insisted on strengthening incubation from academia to industry. And we should not only consider transferring like that does INSERM. We should incubate programs from industry into product to license to the industry. This is done in a few countries, as in UK, you have companies like this, incubators. In Germany, with the company LDC, that is coming from Max Planck, they just incubate programs, develop products, and license it to industry, and we have the same in Belgium. Okay, but we need to probably increase this. Most important is connect patients and health. Patients really are demanding to have products. They don't care if the products are coming from Europe or China or US. They won't just be cured. Okay, so we have to explain all the constraints and have them involved. Usually, what I do in any of my companies, I have patients in the company with wheelchair or handicapped people or rare disease for the scientists to understand the why they work. And finally, we are in the middle of a very strong geopolitical hurdle. And here I would say we should think that we need to consider the patient is at the center of this. We need to not to be racist, sorry to say that. We are racist with Chinese. I have a lot of pupils that are from China and understand their resentment. We should not be racist with US people. They have a different way to think. And we have to keep the patient centered, not forgetting all the political issues, not transforming competition with war. That's the main problem we have today, especially in the US, where they are afraid from China, that therefore they do war to China. This is not the right way, I think, to proceed. So basically, no, sorry.
I think that
that was okay. But my point, my conclusion is, don't forget that unicorns, destiny, the destiny of a startup is in its DNA. So therefore, we should encourage to invest in early stage, not only late stage.
Thank you for this personal view of relationships with China. I think that we have time enough for questions.
I think, Christian, we're actually going to ask you now to conclude the table.
Okay.
We are not taking any questions first right now.
So I will conclude very shortly because what was fascinating remarks. So I think that we have a lot to do to convince our in our nations, our politicians, to give more and swift money in order to solve the health questions as a societal question. I'm very happy to hear what was coming from the minister this morning and what Macron for France said in June. But at the level of Europe, we have to make our strengths converging in order to, with the example of European Investment Bank, in order to give more to this very important issue, which is an issue of existence of Europe, of existence of industry, and we cannot do anything, we cannot do something without the participation of patients. Patients are key now, and COVID-19 demonstrated this very clearly.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, your concerns and your hopes for the future. And we are now going to take our first break. At 10:05, we will be learning more about the creative ideas and approaches for funding innovation. So see you at 10:05 after 15 minutes break.